I didn't mean to leave. I only meant to step outside for air, but by the time I looked back through the glass, she'd already turned away, her reflection folding into the quiet hum of the shop. That's how it always was with her. If I hesitated too long, she disappeared. The day I met Claire, the rain had been falling since morning, the kind that makes the air smell like wet metal and coffee grounds. I was fixing the broken espresso machine in the small cafe attached to her bookstore. The place had that faded, lived-in look. Wooden shelves bending under the weight of books, old photographs pinned near the counter, a lamp that flickered like it had a pulse. She came in from the back room, wearing a dark green cardigan and a look that said she'd been thinking about something heavier than inventory. Her voice, when she spoke, had that even calm of someone who's learned not to raise it, not because she's weak, but because she doesn't need to. "Machine giving you trouble?" she asked. "It's the gasket," I said, kneeling by the counter. "It's worn down. Probably been ignored for a while." She smiled faintly. "Like most things around here. That line sat with me longer than it should have." She wasn't like other people who came and went from the cafe. She didn't fill the silence. She used it. Every question she asked came after a pause long enough to make me aware of my breathing. And every time I answered, I felt like I'd said too much. When I handed her the repaired handle, our fingers brushed. Just that. An accidental touch. Nothing cinematic. But I froze anyway. She didn't pull away. Not right away. Instead, she looked at me the way someone looks at a memory they didn't expect to see again. "Thank you," she said, softly, like it meant something more. After that, I started coming around more than I needed to. Sometimes to fix small things that didn't really need fixing. The light above the register, a squeaky hinge, an excuse to be near the quiet she carried like perfume. She talked about her store the way people talk about something they're afraid of losing. Not quite desperate, but close. And she listened when I spoke. Not politely, but fully, like my words had weight. Still, there was always distance. The kind that doesn't come from age, but from history. One evening, I stayed past closing. We were sorting a box of old poetry books, her reading out titles under the warm buzz of the single lamp. She read one line aloud, something about love surviving in the wrong season, then stopped halfway and closed the book. I asked why she didn't finish it. "Because it ends badly," she said, looking at me. "Not everything needs to be read to the end." She said it like a warning, but I only nodded, pretending I understood. Later that night, as I left, she stood by the door with her arms crossed, half in shadow, her expression unreadable. I remember the light catching the silver in her hair. I wanted to tell her something honest, that I liked being there, that her quiet made sense to me, but I didn't. I just said, "See you tomorrow." She didn't answer, just that small, knowing smile. Now, when I think about the night I walked out, that last argument that shouldn't have been won, I keep going back to that smile. The way it said, "You'll leave one day, and I won't ask you to stay." And she didn't. But every time I pass the cafe window, I still look inside, half expecting to see her there, sleeves rolled up, waiting for a machine that doesn't need fixing anymore. The next time I saw Claire, the afternoon light was slanting through the bookstore windows, hitting the dust like a slow snowfall. She was crouched near the back shelf, sleeves rolled up, a stack of paperbacks balanced on her knee. I hadn't planned to be there. I'd only stopped by because my route home passed her street. But she looked up when I entered, surprised, then smiled in that polite, contained way that made me feel both welcomed and unnecessary. "Back to rescue us from another broken appliance?" she said. "Maybe," I replied, scratching the back of my neck. "Thought I'd check if the espresso machine survived my last fix." "It's behaving," she said, brushing her hands together. Unlike me, I just dropped half a shelf of books. There was something off about her that day. Not wrong, just thinner. Like the air around her had gone fragile. Her hair wasn't tied up the usual way, and her lipstick was faintly smudged, like she'd started the day with good intentions, but lost track somewhere in the middle. I helped her pick up the books. Our hands kept reaching for the same ones, that awkward, repeated motion that made each near touch feel heavier than it should have. She laughed once, softly, and the sound broke the quiet like a window letting in warmth. "Sorry," she said. "You're too young to be spending your afternoon doing this." "I don't mind," I said. "I like being here." She froze for a second. Just a second. Her hand lingered on a worn copy of Letters to a Young Poet. Then she said, "You shouldn't say things like that." Her tone wasn't harsh, just low, careful, like she was steadying something inside herself. We stacked the last of the books in silence. She brushed dust from her jeans and went behind the counter to tidy receipts that didn't need tidying. I leaned against the doorway, watching her, how she bit her lip when she thought, how her bracelets slid down her wrist when she reached for the cash drawer. There was a brief flicker, a look she gave me when she caught me watching. Not a challenge, not even curiosity, just a quiet knowing. I used to have help here, she said, her voice softer. A girl who kept things running. But she left, said it was too quiet. Some people don't like quiet, I said. And you? I smiled. I think quiet says more than people think. She looked at me for a long moment, then exhaled, a small sound, almost a laugh, almost a sigh. You sound older than you are. Maybe I just listen more. Dangerous habit, she said, turning away, but her reflection in the window looked almost grateful. When I left, the street smelled of rain again. She stood behind the counter, watching me go, her fingers resting absently on the rim of a coffee cup she hadn't touched in hours. And for reasons I still don't understand, I turned back halfway down the block, just in time to see her raise that same cup to her lips, pretending she hadn't been waiting to see if I'd look back. It was late, long past closing, the kind of night when rain doesn't fall in sheets, just steady, patient drops that seemed to count time. The bookstore glowed dimly from inside, a pocket of warmth on an empty street. Claire had called earlier that evening. The delivery truck had backed into the side gate and jammed it. She needed help getting it open. I told myself it was no big deal, that anyone could have come by. But still, I was there within 15 minutes. When I arrived, she was in the alley behind the store, holding an umbrella that wasn't doing much against the rain. Her hair was damp, her cardigan clinging to her sleeves. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. I didn't think you'd still be awake, she said. I don't sleep much, I replied, trying not to sound like I'd been waiting for a reason. We worked on the gate together. It was nothing complicated, just a bent hinge and a little rust. But it took longer than it should have because neither of us spoke much. The sound of rain and metal filled the spaces where conversation should have gone. When it finally gave way with a sharp creak, she laughed, a brief, relieved sound, and touched my arm without realizing. Just a thank you gesture. But her hand stayed a second too long, her fingers pressing lightly against my sleeve before she caught herself and pulled back. Sorry, she murmured. It's fine, I said, though I could still feel the warmth of her hand after she stepped away. We went inside to dry off. She made tea, the weak, pale kind she always drank when she couldn't sleep. I sat across from her at the small table near the back, the one surrounded by old travel books and postcards from places she said she'd never get to see. You ever think about leaving? I asked quietly. Her eyes flicked up. Where would I go? Anywhere. Somewhere new. She smiled faintly. People like me don't start over. We just adjust. There was something brittle in the way she said it, the kind of truth that slips out when someone's too tired to lie. For a moment, I thought she might say more. Her gaze lingered on me, soft but searching, like she wanted to hand me something fragile and didn't trust me to keep it safe. Then her phone rang. The name lit up the screen, Daniel. She hesitated before answering. Her tone shifted, low and careful. No, I'm fine. Yes, it's still raining. I looked away, pretending not to listen, but every word landed like a weight. The conversation lasted barely a minute. When she hung up, she kept her hand on the phone, her knuckles pale. Everything okay? I asked. She nodded. Old habits, she said quietly. Some people call when they shouldn't. The rain eased against the windows, leaving the room heavy with the smell of wet wood and silence. I wanted to say something, to ask who he was, to ask why her voice sounded small when she spoke to him. But instead, I reached across the table and pushed her forgotten cup closer. Your tea's getting cold, I said. She looked at the cup, then at me. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The space between us felt impossibly small, as if something invisible had just leaned forward. And then she smiled, that same restrained, complicated smile, and said, You should go before the rain stops. So I did. But I stood outside for a long time afterward, the rain tapering off, staring through the window where she sat alone, her hand still resting on the phone like she hadn't decided whether to pick it up again. It was quiet in the shop again, too quiet, even for her bookstore. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, just suspended. I'd come by unannounced, carrying a small box of tools I didn't really need. The excuse was that the espresso machine had started leaking again, but I think we both knew it hadn't. She was standing by the front window, arms crossed, watching the street like it might give her an answer. The late afternoon light caught in her hair, soft and silver at the edges. When I spoke, my voice felt like an intrusion. "Hey." She didn't turn right away. "You shouldn't keep showing up like this," she said. "I know. You say that every time. I mean it this time." That made her turn. Her eyes met mine, steady, unreadable, but there was something else under the surface now. Something frayed. She exhaled, rubbing her temple. "You don't understand what this looks like. I'm not trying to make it look like anything." "Yes, you are," she said, softer now. "You're trying to make it mean something." I didn't answer, because she wasn't wrong. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The rain from the night before had returned, light, rhythmic, tapping against the glass. I could hear the clock on the counter ticking, every second louder than it should have been. Finally, she spoke again. "You remind me of a version of myself I don't get to be anymore." That stopped me. "What does that mean?" I asked. She smiled faintly, without humor. "It means you're still looking ahead. And I'm tired of pretending I am." Something in her voice, the break on the last word, made the air shift. She sat down at the nearest table, pressing her palms flat against the wood. I moved closer, but not too close. Just enough to see the tremor in her hands. "You think I don't see what's happening," she said quietly. "But I do. And it scares me." "Scares you how?" "Because you make me want to explain myself," she whispered. "And I haven't had to do that in years." The words sat between us, bare and trembling. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I wanted to reach out, to steady her hand, to tell her I wasn't asking for anything, but my body refused to move. The distance between us felt deliberate, like neither of us trusted what would happen if it disappeared. She looked at me then, really looked, and said, "We can't keep doing this." Her voice wasn't sharp, but it landed like a door closing slowly. "I know," I said. But neither of us moved outside. A car passed, splashing water against the curb. The sound felt far away, like it belonged to another world entirely. She reached for the cup on the table, the same chipped mug she always used, and missed it slightly, her hand shaking. Then, almost under her breath, she said, "I thought I'd stopped needing people." And that was it. The quiet after that was unbearable. Too full, too human, too close to something neither of us had words for. I didn't see her for nearly a week. The bookstore stayed closed, blinds drawn halfway. A "back soon" sign hanging like a question she hadn't answered yet. I walked by more times than I'll admit, each time telling myself I was just passing through, not waiting. When she finally called, her voice sounded different. Softer, tired, but clear. "Could you stop by tomorrow? I found something you might as well fix before it falls apart again." The next afternoon, I went. The shop smelled faintly of old paper and lemon polish, a smell I hadn't realized I'd missed until that moment. She was behind the counter, sorting through a box of old photographs. Her hair was tied back, loose strands falling against her cheek. "I didn't know you took pictures," I said. "I didn't," she murmured, pulling out one and holding it up to the light. "These were my husband's. He used to photograph everything, even moments that shouldn't have been kept." The word husband landed with quiet weight. She'd never mentioned him before. She passed the photo to me, a black and white print of a younger Claire, standing in front of this very shop, laughing. A man's hand rested on her shoulder, though his face was out of frame. "You look happy," I said carefully. "I was," she replied. "For a while." She reached into the box again, slower this time, pulling out another picture. The same doorway, but empty. Just the sign, the window, the shadow of someone who wasn't there anymore. "He left," I asked before I could stop myself. "Cancer," she said quietly. It was quick. Too quick for us to fix anything. The room felt smaller. The ticking clock in the corner filled the space like a metronome for something fragile. "I'm sorry," I said, though the words felt thin, insufficient. She nodded, setting the photos aside. "I thought I'd made peace with it. Then you started coming around, fixing things that didn't need fixing, and I started feeling the kind of noise I thought I'd buried with him." Her voice cracked on noise, a small, unguarded sound. I didn't know what to do with my hands. Every instinct told me to reach out, to hold the grief she was spilling into the air. But I stayed still, afraid that any movement might break the spell of honesty between us. Claire, I said, barely above a whisper. She shook her head. You don't need to say anything. I just wanted you to know. So you'd stop trying to save things that aren't broken. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The afternoon light shifted across the floor, creeping toward her feet, turning the edges of the photographs gold. When she finally looked at me, her eyes were glassy but steady. He used to stand where you're standing, she said softly. Always watching me work, always saying he liked the way I filled the silence. She smiled then, a small, fragile curve that didn't reach her eyes. I think that's what scares me, she whispered. You stand the same way. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't just grief she was fighting. It was memory, coming back to life in the shape of me. It took days before I went back. Not because I wanted distance, but because I didn't trust what I'd say if I saw her too soon. When I finally did, it was early evening. The shop was half-lit, a lamp glowing near the back where she sat reading with her glasses sliding down her nose. The sight of her felt strangely grounding, like coming home to a place that no longer belonged to you, but still remembered your name. She looked up when I walked in. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. Then she said, softly, "You're late. I wasn't sure I should come. I wasn't sure you would." The quiet between us felt less like a wall this time, and more like a fragile bridge we both were trying not to break. I walked closer, stopping at the counter. "I shouldn't have asked about him," I said. "It wasn't my place." "You didn't ask anything I wasn't already answering," she replied, closing her book. "I just didn't realize how much of him was still sitting in the room." I nodded, unsure what to do with the weight sitting behind her words. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit, please." So I did. The lamplight fell between us, warm and uneven. She reached for her mug, turned it in her hands, and then said, "I keep thinking about how grief tricks you into silence. You start believing no one will understand, so you stop trying to be understood. And then someone walks in and looks at you like you're still visible," she said quietly. "And it becomes harder to pretend you're fine." I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until then. "I wasn't trying to make anything harder for you," I said. She smiled faintly. "You didn't. You just reminded me that I'm still capable of being seen, and that's its own kind of trouble." The words sat there, tender, dangerous, true. I wanted to reach for her, but I didn't move. Instead, I waited. She set the mug down and looked straight at me. "You feel like a second chance at something I thought I'd run out of time for. But I don't know what to do with that." "You don't have to do anything," I said. "You don't owe me that." Her eyes softened. Relief, sorrow, something unnameable flickering in them. "I know," she said. "But I don't want to pretend anymore, either." Outside, wind pressed against the window, scattering the sound of passing cars. Inside, the only thing I could hear was her breathing, steady, real, close. She reached across the table, hesitated, then let her hand rest near mine. Not touching, just there, within reach. I turned my hand slowly, my fingers brushing hers. A light, accidental contact that neither of us corrected. No words followed. None were needed. The silence between us, for the first time, felt alive. Not the kind that hides what's unsaid, but the kind that holds it gently. When I finally looked up, she was smiling, small, tired, true. And I knew, without saying it, that we'd both stopped pretending we didn't feel what was already here. The rain started again outside. Neither of us moved to close the window. It's been months since that night, the night we didn't say the words, but said everything anyway. The bookstore still stands where it always has. I pass it some evenings on my way home, slowing down just enough to see the faint glow from inside, the silhouettes of people browsing the shelves. She still runs it, of course. Still keeps the same chipped mug by the counter, still pretends the espresso machine needs maintenance even when it doesn't. We don't talk every day anymore. Sometimes, not for weeks. But every so often, I'll get a message, "Rain again. Thought of you." Or I'll send her a photo, the sky breaking after a storm, a coffee cup left half full. No explanations, just fragments. That's enough. What happened between us didn't fade, it settled. It became something softer, quieter, not an ache, not a promise, just a truth we both carry without needing to define it. I used to think love was about pursuit, the constant trying, the wanting, the fear of losing it. But Claire taught me something else entirely. That love can live in restraint. In the moments you don't take, the words you choose to leave unspoken. She once told me that grief changes shape but never disappears. I think love's the same. It doesn't end. It learns to breathe differently. Sometimes, when I think about her, about that day she said, I thought I'd stopped needing people. I realize she was wrong. We all need someone. Not to fix us, not to fill the silence, but to sit with us inside it. That's what we were to each other. Not saviors, not replacements. Just two people who, for a while, made the quiet feel less empty. And maybe that's enough. When I picture her now, she's by the window again, reading, the light catching her hair just like it did that first day. I like to think she smiles when she remembers, not because of what we were, but because she finally allowed herself to feel something again. As for me, I walk past the shop, sometimes even stop by, and every time I hear that familiar bell above the door, I still feel it. That small, unexplainable pull. Not longing, not regret, just gratitude. Because some people arrive in your life not to stay, but to remind you what it feels like to be truly seen. And when I think about the night I walked out, I realize now, maybe she didn't need me to come back. Maybe she just needed to know that I would've. Sparkles, if this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?